And it's the most innocent thing. Never been worried about it. It's like school.
Are you? No, I've done some, but I still. I'm taking pictures. They think that we do more shit than older than adults. I feel like it's harder. I think it's harder. There's no
Very
Production.
Yeah, that's right. That's not for me.
Well, now that humans, he's about to get a rude awakening that there's not 72 presents because he's ordering, he's building his own computer. So there's some motherboards and all that stuff. So, yeah. So you're gonna get like 6 Pistons tickets, like, he's not going for like, he's not asking for like a basket.
Yeah, that's right. That's what they change, is that it's like, if they want to kind of get to your store.
Yeah.
and they like, see, this
Oh,
Yeah, I had asthma as a kid.
you're gonna be a really excellent grandmother.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, it's not like that. Oh, I can't wait. You heard me right.
Yeah, I've told you how many pilots. 27 pilots. I was 28. So you're going to. You know, they made movies about my mom. Listen, no.
They're taking care of the dogs together over before.
One of the fights right now. When I was at the trails behind them, so I had to stop.
All right. 6:30, call the meeting to order. Can we have roll call?
I have it.
We have the December 14th, 2023 agenda in front of you.
Make a motion to approve the agenda of regular meeting of December 14th.
Second. All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Move on to public comments. This is the time for the public to address us on anything.
Skip minutes.
Oh, so fun. We'll go to the minutes. We have the minutes in front of us for the regular meeting held on November 9th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting that was held on November 9th, 2023, as presented.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Then we'll move on to public comments. I'll open up public comments. And this is when you can address the commission on anything that's not already on the agenda this evening. Go ahead, state your name, please.
Yes, my name is Jose Gonzalez. Some of you may know me. Where I work here. I do reside in the city, but I'm a Lapeer County boy. I'd also like to address this. Had an accident with casserole just on shelf, and so that's what happened here. But I know that the grow facility is on there, and I think we've had enough. I mean, you can drive into Lapeer in the summertime and during the harvest season, and I am a recreational user. I'm not going to stand here and lie to you, but I mean, I think that's enough. We have, within a mile stretch, there are, 4 dispensaries. You have Pure, you have the 2 right there where Shango's used to be, then the Shango's, and then Exclusive right next to it. And then we're proposing another grow, Ray C's grow. There's a grow right there, I mean, what, barely within a mile, maybe, from the high school. You know, and surrounded the old growth and opportunity. You know, like I said, I grew up in this town, and I never thought in my day I'd see it, and I used to say, man, that'd be cool when Awana became legal. And then I never thought it would go this way. You know, so it was one of those things. Hindsight's 20/20. So I really feel it could be better served, and unfortunately, it is right next to a dispensary. So you don't want to put a kids zone there. You don't want to put some kind of family activity right next to a dispensary. So, I mean, but there are better ways, you know, mechanic shop, different things could be put there. Shoot, I mean, it's next to a dispensary, put another restaurant in. So I'd like to also thank you all for your time as well. And you guys have a wonderful day. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, public comments. We'll move on to the public hearing schedule for this evening. We have a request from Richard Swain for a special land use in order to operate a marijuana grow facility at 39 West Genesee. Jason?
Thank you. Good evening. Jason Ball with Rowe Professional Services Company. We're the city's planning consultant. I will really quickly run through the analysis for the special land use request in front of you. As mentioned, it is for a marijuana grow facility. This is the parcel. The address is 39 West Genesee Street. Immediately to the west, the west is an existing marijuana retailer. This is Crave, a restaurant. This here is the Arnold's Car Wash building. To the south, here are 2 duplexes, and then we just saw another special land use a couple months back for this building to become a salon. The entire area is within our mixed-use zoning district. That's the crosshatch that lays over all of those parcels there. The red color is the B2 General Business Zoning District. As you all may be aware, any properties within that mixed-use zoning district may request any use that's permitted in essentially any district in the city by special land use. And so in this case, those 2 properties are zoned B2 General Business. The applicant's coming and requesting a special land use for a marijuana grow facility because it is those marijuana grow facilities are permitted in the I-1 industrial district.
Mr. Ball, is this
Yes.
a medical or a recreational adult use marijuana grow operation?
I believe recreational adult use. This is the existing site as it exists today. You all may remember previously there was a building on this site that has since been demolished. The site is essentially vacant and almost entirely flat. This is the view of the site from the south, from Howard Street. Just some history on this proposal, because for many of you in the Planning Commission that have been here for a while, you may remember this request. Originally, the special land use was approved in July of 2021. A site plan was then approved that October. Landscaping variances were granted for the former site plan request in June of 2021 to allow for a variance from the required width of buffer zones, and then in October to allow for a variance to not install a fence or berm within the landscape. Since the 2+ years since that happened, one of the significant issues for the applicant, and I'm sure they can speak to this, is there were issues with locating utilities and then getting access to utilities for the site. They worked with adjacent property owners to try to establish necessary easement agreements. Once they finally got those easement agreements finalized, there just wasn't enough time for them to be able to move forward with building plan review and approval, and so the site plan and special land use expired in October of this year. When the site plan expires, so too do the variances. And so the variances that were granted for the site are no longer relevant. We'll talk a little bit because some changes have since happened with the city's ordinance that make some of those variances unnecessary. So there are 6 standards in the zoning ordinance that any special land use has to be evaluated against to be approved. And so, as you all may recall, special land use and a site plan go together, but we take action on the 2 separately. So as we're thinking about special land use, we're thinking about the use in general. So is this use appropriate for this site based on these standards and based on the site plan the applicant has submitted? If that special land use is approved, then we moved into site plan, we get into details about landscaping buffers and those sorts of things. Certainly thinking about buffers are a relevant consideration for land use, but generally we're thinking about special land use, we're sort of looking at the site from a 10,000 foot perspective, and then when we're thinking about site plan, we're digging into the details of the site. So the special land use approval standards, the first is that the use must be compatible and in accordance with the goals and objectives and policies of the City of Lapeer master plan. The master plan identifies the area within the mixed use future land use classification. And it defines that mixed use future land use classification as including residential, commercial, and office uses. It doesn't actually say industrial. So there's some inconsistency between the city's master plan in terms of how that mixed use area should be, and how it actually got implemented in the zoning ordinance. Because the zoning ordinance allows for essentially all uses in that location. And so given that, the planning commission may want to consider to evaluate special considerations for the use. The master plan specifically identifies the importance of performance standards. Performance standards are things like limiting potential noise, odor, impact on adjacent properties. And so if the planning commission considers approving this special land use, you may consider some conditions that would address some of those relevant performance standards for the use. The second standard is that the use promotes the intent of the ordinance in the zoning district in which the use is proposed. The request meets the standards for the mixed use zoning district. It's pretty straightforward. The use is constructed, operated, and maintained to be compatible with the existing or intended character of the general facility, and not change the essential character of the area. So on either side of the use, we have a car wash, a self-serve and automatic car wash. On the other side, we have a retail marijuana use, restaurant further down the block, across the street, the car dealership. Overall, the building in terms of its size and format generally fits in with the standards of the existing buildings. The use as an industrial marijuana grow facility is a little higher intensity than some of the surrounding uses, certainly those to the south with the two duplex residential properties. I will mention though that those two duplex residential properties are on properties that are zoned industrial. So they're non-conforming uses in that sense, although they're in that mixed use zoning district. So in essence, if they got a special land use, they'd be approved, anything goes there. The next standard that the use is served adequately by public facilities and services, roads, police, fire, drainage, etc. There's no anticipated extra demand on city services in this area. There are some notes that were identified by the Department of Public Works and the city's engineer related to concerns on drainage to the southern portion of the property. And so those are an important consideration to be addressed certainly as we talk about the site plan. To just ensure that any drainage issues on that site that are historically are addressed as part of this development. And then lastly, not involve uses, activities, processes, or conditions that compared to permitted uses in the district would be detrimental to the natural environment, public health, safety, or welfare by production of traffic noise, smoke, odors, or other such nuisance. And so in this case, I will say that over the last 2.5 years or so, since this use was originally approved at this site, the city has consistently struggled with issues around odor from marijuana facilities, particularly grows. And so as we think about, evaluating that use in what is a pretty heavy commercial, residential kind of mixed use area, it's appropriate for the planning commission to really understand from the applicant how they're going to mitigate any of those potential issues and having confidence that those issues won't be present. So based on that analysis, staff's recommendation is to approve the special land use, conditioned upon approval of a site plan for this facility, and we're recommending that planning commission add a condition to the special land use approval that no odor or related nuisances are present on the site that would impact adjacent properties. That standard essentially exists for any use in the city. The reason to recommend it related to special land use is as a planning commission, you have the ability to revoke a special land use. And so by requiring that condition, if there was a time in the future where odor was an issue on that site, you would have an immediate option to be able to hold a public hearing and revoke the special land use for the operation of the site versus going through our traditional sort of enforcement process. Any questions from me?
I have a question. Yeah. So the odor concern, and that the fact that you're we're hearing complaints from other grow areas that there is an odor. We approved those locations based on the fact that they were supposed to, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Correct.
Have any of those locations, they had their special land use revoked?
They have not. We've gone through several sort of enforcement actions and follow-up with some positive results, some results that are still sort of outstanding.
Did they have that condition like that, so where you could automatically bring it to a public hearing and actually have it immediately revoked, or was it just?
I don't
What was
know.
about that?
I'd have to go back. We have to go back and look at the minutes. I don't know for sure.
I remember that area, there's that, the one that runs along the street next to him there, I mean, there, it smells awful over there. And we've addressed that, and we went over, and I believe their, filter systems weren't working, or they were in violation for sure. But it, I mean, it still smells awful over there. So it's kind of, to me, to say that we can revoke it if there's an odor, I mean, these places have an odor, right? I mean, that's just, if you approve it based on that, I mean, that's right away, we're not maybe enforcing these places, but they definitely have an
I
odor.
mean, I would say not all of them in the city do. So we have several, I would say, are good actors where we don't have that issue, and then we have several where we do have that issue. And the struggle from the city's perspective, just so you know, is odor is a tricky thing to pin down. And so, staff is working on building consistent records of those issues to be able to follow up on enforcement and feel really confident legally that we can do that, but that takes some time.
And remind me one more question. We limited to 6, that was 6 retail stores, and we had an unlimited for the grow ups and the other uses, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, just 2 weeks ago, early in the evening, driving through that area, 2 blocks away from, I could smell it. So it's still an issue. And it was pretty strong to be that far away and still be able to smell.
And so the applicant may be able to speak to, their approach and how and maybe their experience and being sure that that's a factor they can limit. I can't speak to, their standards. Our building inspector is here tonight, Mike Newmeyer, and he has been a part of a lot of that enforcement. You can speak to that too if you'd like to hear from it, but he might be in the spot.
But if we approve, we really don't have much of a leg to stand on to curtail it, it sounds like.
We do. It's just an element of any time that we enforce something, we're potentially considering revoking a permit to run a business or a use. That's a big deal. And so the city has to be very cautious and deliberate to be sure that if we do that, that we feel really comfortable in our ability to back it up in a court of law. And so unfortunately, that takes some time.
Mr. Ball, I do have a couple technical questions.
Sure.
So you've stated now twice that pretty much any use is permitted in this mixed-use overlay district. I've got the ordinance in front of me. And while, just speaking, I understand what you're saying. The ordinance indicates that all uses allowed in the R1, RM, OS1, B1, B2, CB1, and I1 zoning districts as principal uses are permitted as SLUs. The proposed use of this property as a recreational marijuana grow operation, is that a permitted use in any of those zoning districts?
So there's sort of a funny technicality in the zoning ordinance that I will note for you all. Give me just a second here. So this is the section of the ordinance that permits marijuana uses in the industrial zoning district. And the heading there says medical marijuana. So if we read that literally, what that would mean would be only medical marijuana uses are permitted in the I1 district. My sense is that was likely an oversight in drafting that amendment when it came through, because that amendment was part of providing for both adult recreational and medical marijuana, but that is what it says.
So another question, Mr. Ball. Review standards 7-19.04 for special land use. Subpart 8 that it shall be compatible in accordance with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Lapeer City Master Plan. This is a commercial corridor, and at least according to the medical marijuana section there, that is an industrial use. In your opinion, is an industrial use an appropriate and compatible use under the city's master plan for a commercial corridor?
Typically, no, to answer really directly. In this case, I think that the challenge in front of the planning commission is just, and this is the reason why, approvals expire, is because circumstances and realities change. I think when this use was approved a little over 2 years ago, and that was at the very beginning of my time being associated with work in the city, the circumstances of that area of the city were quite different. Since that time, there's been a fair amount of redevelopment in that area where the use as proposed being sort of industrial and not necessarily commercial in nature may have a greater impact on the character of that corridor than it would have had 2 years ago.
I think we were we spent a lot of time on this, and I think we could really specifically narrow that down to an industrial use, an industrial district where they had to go. I mean, and I think too, the mixed use was again something we had a great discussion on, not being, it's a mixed use of a lot of things, but industrial was in its own category. I mean, I don't know if anyone else remembers that, but when we went over that, I mean, that was definitely something that was discussed, that when we did our perimeters and our distances and stuff, that this was an industrial use.
So, sorry, I've got lots of technical questions for you. So subpart C, same section, that it shall be constructed, operated, maintained so as to be compatible with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity. Please remind me, what are the uses of the surrounding properties?
Sure. So to the south, you have two duplexes located on 2 separate parcels. And then the salon that used to be the frame shop. And then to the west, you have the car dealership, the car wash with a sort of light industrial building there on the corner. To the south, and then to the east, you have the existing marijuana retailer, and then Craig, the restaurant there, kind of closes out that block. Oh, and sorry, and on the far southwestern corner of the block, you have the building that came in and requested a special day use for multifamily. We have not heard that from, so that building is currently vacant with a few apartments upstairs.
So you've got a couple residential uses, a restaurant, a retail marijuana store. Are any of those industrial uses?
There's a light industrial use there at the southeast corner of that block.
So one of those 7 or 8 surrounding parcels?
Correct. I can be more specific here. So this here is that sort of light industrial.
Is that also a grow facility there?
No. At one point, it was consideration for it to be. It's currently vacant. They recently received a zoning permit to do some light, like auto restoration in that building.
And then, sorry, just one more. So subpart E, same section, shall not involve uses, activities, processes, materials, et cetera, that shall produce excessive production of traffic noise, smoke, or odors, or other such nuisance. As this board is well aware, as Mr. Ball has indicated, we have several, in my opinion, marijuana grow operations which produce significant odor and are nuisances to the city. In no part of the materials that were submitted to me as part of this planning commission review, I saw nothing to show that this applicant has put any effort into odor control as part of their site plan review. Now, that might have been submitted as part of a license application or something else, but it's not in front of us. If we are to make a proper determination about whether their proposal for odor control is going to meet the special land use standards, it has to be submitted to us. I've not seen it. Has anyone else seen the odor control for this property? So I guess my question then, sorry,
No, you're fine.
has there been anything submitted to you that we have not seen regarding odor control from the site plan and zoning control perspective?
And so that's an oversight on our part as a department. There was information submitted with the previous submittal that addressed that standard, which addresses the city's licensing standard. But it's in essence that, that the appropriate equipment and processes will be in place to ensure there isn't any odor as part of the city's licensing process. So the applicant may be able to speak to that more specifically and provide more information.
Is this current application that's submitted today the same exact application that was submitted previously?
It is extremely similar. There are a couple of small changes. For example, the variance regarding buffers on either side is no longer required. It's now to meet the 20-foot standard. It didn't meet the 20-foot standard before. Otherwise, in essence, it's the same. So
Any more discussion?
I want to make sure I understand. So when you say previous, it was addressed, is that in the proposal that's no longer valid? Or is it part of the one that's current but not?
I would assume it's part of both, but the applicant didn't specifically submit it here, and that's partially our fault because we didn't identify that issue during our letter to the applicant. So we, as you all know, we do initial review. We send a note to the applicant saying, please address these outstanding issues, and then they follow up. The last time this came through in that initial review, we identified that as the issue to address. This time we did not. So that issue should be provided, but part of that's our fault. We didn't ask for it.
All right, any more discussion? All right, I'm gonna open up public hearing. Anybody who would like
Thank you,
to,
Mr. Ball.
like to speak on this matter, please raise your hand and then speak.
I just
Your
have
name?
one question that's struck me curious.
Hold on, sir.
Sorry.
I'll call on you in a minute. We have someone back here.
I'm so sorry, miss.
Hello, Chair, Planning Commission. My name is James McNeilis. I'm with Stuckey and Vitale Architects. We are here representing the client who was also here. We were here 2 years ago presenting the same facility at the same location. Since that time, we have gone through an extended legal process to try to work out these easements with utilities. It really has been a unique challenge in my experience, trying to obtain this utility easement. And thankfully, we are now on the other side of that. We are excited to move forward with this project. And so we are here to ask for your approval again and happy to answer any questions.
Did you say your name?
James McNeilis with Stuckey and Vitale
Oh,
Architects.
sorry. Thank you. Any questions? Do you want to?
You've heard the questions I was asking Mr. Ball. Are you ready to address any of those?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Please.
So the first question regarding odor, it sounds like there have been some bad experiences in the community regarding odor at some or similar facilities. I will say we have the benefit now of having produced a fully engineered set of construction documents that is ready to go. And as part of that engineering process, we have filtration in every unit. We also have processes that we can go through as an operational standpoint, but really we are very aware of the issue of odor. And if it is any help to this body, we are prepared to commit to creating not a nuisance as part of this development.
Well, I mean, not to speak on behalf of the board, because I wasn't here for all the other marijuana businesses that have been approved, but I'm certain that promise was made by every other facility. So who engineered the odor control system for this building?
So that would be with MA Engineering, a very reputable firm. And I will say that we are happy to work with the building and engineering departments. If we have the opportunity to submit our full construction documents to evaluate the odor specifically. So I can understand if promises were made in the past and the results did not follow those promises. With that in mind, we can take the extra step of developing that odor control system with the engineering department directly to make sure the performance is up to the standards of the community.
Thank you. All right. Anyone? Thank you.
I guess,
Do
sorry.
you have one? Sorry.
Yeah, in reference to that, one of the times that the odor was addressed, the rationale was that it was turned off, that there was some kind of turn-off system on that for off hours.
Oh.
So what, is there built in yours that it would be a 24-hour process in place so that that doesn't happen?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Any more questions from applicants? All right, anyone else like to speak on the matter? Okay.
My name is Tim Denning. I speak on behalf of myself and my family and no one else. Years ago, we built a new commercial office on Saginaw Street. I have worked there for decades. I love the city. Until recently, it's been very clean, very well managed. I think your park system is a jewel, unlike almost any other city of our size in the state. During the warm weather months, I use the public trail behind my office almost every day. Lately, I'm disappointed. The city has approved 6 new marijuana businesses within a half to 3/4 of a mile from my office. The odor problem is bad. There are mornings where I swim through marijuana odors in my parking lot to get to my office door, sometimes holding my breath a bit, hoping I'm not high by the time I get to the door. I swim through marijuana odors to get through the parking lot to one of my favorite restaurants, Crave's. When you go by the old Lapeer Co-op building, it is a stunningly obnoxious marijuana odor. I mean, to the point where inside a closed vehicle, you almost stop your vehicle and like, whoa. I just spoke to a person this morning who said they specifically made a decision not to buy a home in this area of Lapeer because they did not want to deal with the marijuana odors. I talked to a business, someone that owns a substantial business on Genesee Street recently, about a week ago. And in the mornings when they crank up their business, they have intake fans. And the marijuana odors are so prevalent that it pulls in those marijuana odors and literally pervades their workspace to the point where they have indicated in the near future they will be moving their business out of Lapeer for that reason. They asked me a very good question. They said, how many marijuana places do we need? I like McDonald's restaurants. If McDonald's came to you and said, you know what, we'd like to put at least 2 McDonald's stores in every block of your commercial district, what would you tell them? We don't need that many McDonald's restaurants. Why are the marijuana businesses not being given the same line? The city is quickly turning into a swamp of marijuana fumes. I had a blow up that showed your marijuana ordinance, but your planner already quoted it for me that you strictly prohibit any of these businesses to allow any nuisance off-site odors. Clearly, that has not worked. Not a single one of your grow facilities has proven that they can keep their odors on site. And to put this industrial use in a predominantly commercial district would be completely inappropriate. I would also note that there's a financial risk to the city when you put too many of your eggs in one basket. A healthy economy generally means something with a diverse mixture of businesses. You can look at the newspaper articles in major newspapers in this state, and they indicate this marijuana is a very volatile, financially volatile industry. This is the kind of industry that can collapse, and if it collapses, they're going to take a whole stream of businesses that you have concentrated in one area. I know just some of the comments of your planner that they have had tremendous problem with the grow facilities with their odors. That they're supposed to strictly require their grow facilities to keep their odors on site. You may not. Let's put it this way: you know much more than you did 3 years ago when you approved those other facilities. We should not make a mistake that can be avoided by learning from what you have learned over the last few years. This city does not need a 7th marijuana business in such a small stretch of our town.
All right,
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Go ahead, sir.
My name's Chris Swain. I don't have a prepared speech. I just want to kind of talk a little bit about where we've been and a little bit about myself. What we took is a piece of property that had a very old building, very terrible looking building, and we took that building down. We took property that was polluted, and we dug up all the dirt, replaced it, and now we have a good piece of property moving forward. I'm not a marijuana user. I'm a business person. I have worked for Beaumont Hospital for 34 years. I come forward with a plan I believe that is reasonable, and I feel like I don't want to be pigeonholed by some of my predecessors and maybe their lack of following through on the request. You have my absolute word that we're going to build a good building, a solid building, and a building that meets all of your regulations. I've been in business, as I said, for some 40 years. We are well capitalized. We have a great business plan, and I assure you that we will have a good business. We will add value to the city. We will add taxable value to the city. And I promise you, we will not be one of these facilities that have to come forward and have issues with their owners. So that's all I wanted to say, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Hearing no more, I'm going to close the public hearing. Any comments? Any comments from commissioners? I'm going to say I appreciate from the applicant. I'm not worried about the construction of the building or what it's going to look like. But to me, it seems like the odor is not something. I mean, you could spot every marijuana. I don't care what building it is. In my opinion, you can spot it out of town. So to me, that's something that I feel like the best system, what requirements we've had before, it's an odor, you can smell it. I think personally, I think that's why we designate it as an industrial, because it does hurt your neighboring parcels. You've got a business, a restaurant, your neighbors. I mean, it's something that is a nuisance to their business. And, I wish we would have restricted the use rather than just the retail stores and all of them, because I don't think this is what this town needs to be known as. So again, I respect you bringing this to us, but again, I just feel like it doesn't matter what we've done up to this point, the odor is definitely a nuisance.
I think if we approve it tonight, we're going to be in violation of Article 10 because recreational marijuana use is not permitted use in the I-1 zoning district. On top of that, I'm not convinced at this point that the applicant has shown sufficient information for us to properly review this under 719.04, subsections A, C, and E. If I were to make a motion, I'm not sure if we're ready for one, I would motion to table it to allow the applicant to provide more information to address the concerns of the commission, specifically those issues.
I would support actually what you just indicated. I do think that in regards to the odor control emissions, I think that we do need, I understand that, they've indicated that they're going to make sure they're taken care of, but I do think it would be helpful for us to have that information, whether it should have been asked for or they should have just voluntarily provided it. I do think that is something that we should look at, because I don't know whether it's the same as what other facilities have actually utilized. I was going to ask a question. One of the questions I had is that if this odor control emission equipment is so great, are there other facilities that have used this particular product, for lack of a better word, to kind of show evidence that other facilities don't have the same issue, that there are facilities that use this particular equipment that when you drive by, you don't have those odors come about? Because I too, actually, when you drive down Court Street, it is significant, not all the time. There have been times I drive by and it's fine, but there was a time there where it was constant for 2 or 3 weeks. It was significant. So I think it is important that we have that information. So I would agree that we should table it to get that information first.
Commissioner Johnson?
If it's not allowed in this district, what does it matter how good a filtering system you have? If it's not allowed, it's not allowed.
It's probably appropriate to give the applicant the opportunity to provide information why they think it is allowed. You know, and I understand this was here a year and a half ago, and maybe the planning commission made a mistake at that point, but I always think it's appropriate to give them the opportunity to respond, and we can't expect them on their feet to make that determination or provide us evidence at this time.
Well, with that, it's not an acceptable use in that district, so even if we tell them they bring it back, it's probably gonna go outside of that, so I guess we have three options. One is to deny it, to accept it, to table it, or to accept it as presented, right? I mean, but to me, it's not allowed in this district.
Well, did you make a motion? Okay, and it was the second, so.
There was a second. Wait,
Yeah.
who made the motion? I didn't hear that.
I didn't hear a motion.
I have not made a motion.
Oh, I thought you made a
I-
motion.
If I were to make a
Oh,
motion.
I'm sorry, yeah, I thought you said you made a motion. I'm back to the concern that even if they bring the information and we're considering it, we still have if there is a problem, we have no immediate ability to take care of the issue. We can be dealing with this a longer period of time than just one instance. I mean, we're going through that now with these other businesses who promised us that it would be addressed. It's an ongoing problem. And you brought up really good points about, and the gentleman who addressed the business and the fact that the odor affects their businesses. We're not doing justice to the neighbors if we allow something in an area that it's not allowed and it continues to be a problem because we're not able to address it in any immediate fashion. It's just gonna be an ongoing police action, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it.
So, one point, Madam Chair. If you all as a planning commission are concerned about whether or not it's a permitted use, I guess I would encourage you to table this to get an opinion from the city's attorney. So at this point in time, you have permitted multiple marijuana uses under that same provision for that same zoning district. And so I don't know what that means, but I would, as your planner, I'd recommend you get an opinion from the city attorney before you choose to deny this special land use based on that provision, because that's the same provision that's been in place as far as I know, as long as you've had a marijuana ordinance, and you certainly approved other adult products. Obviously, mistakes happen, but in terms of how you handle that in this case, I don't know. And so I would request that we table to get an opinion from the city attorney on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a comment. So what I sometimes struggle with is we have the master plan, we have policies, and there's a reason we created those. But as I sit here and I'm listening to people that live in this town, and I live here, I live 2 blocks from here, this is a big problem, the odor. It's not isolated to these 2 people. You hear it all the time. And my concern is that we are headed down that path. So whether it should be in that zone or not, I don't even know if that's the question that I'm trying to answer.
So just to be absolutely clear though, we wouldn't be denying it on some future possibility of odor. We don't know if that would happen or not. We cannot pigeonhole them, like the gentleman indicated. We have that concern, obviously, which they could produce, whatever environmental engineering about odor control that might convince us. But if we're going to seek legal opinion, if we're going to table, it should be for the review standards, AC and E, as I indicated previously.
See, but that's what I go back to, that you're being specific to a set of rules. What I'm talking about is something that's not within the guidelines. It's public concern.
Which is not our determination to make.
I learned that several years ago. Unfortunately, we can't restrict the numbers unless we have something set. So whether it's the 3rd or the 10th, we can't deny it based on the number it is, only whether or not it meets the criteria, which is frustrating.
I'm sure you're ready for a motion.
I am.
A motion that we table this pending legal review from the city attorney and to provide the applicant opportunity to respond to the concerns of the commission regarding 7-19.04 subparts A, C, and E. And furthermore, Article 10 mixed-use overlay district for the industrial 1 zoning district, and whether medical marijuana is, I guess, appropriate for a recreational marijuana application.
Support.
Any more discussion? Who supported that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for that. All right. Before we move on, I want to apologize. I think I should have started the meeting welcoming Josh Atwood, Commissioner Atwood. He is our new, newly appointed. I know, I thought I should have welcomed you, so I apologize, that you are. Well, thank you. I was welcome to the meeting. I'm glad you're here. With that said, we'll move on to the site plan reviews for this evening. We have a site plan for construction of a pier cultivation facility at 39 and 47 West Genesee. And I have a question with the address there. Is this, that's the same address as the Richard Swain's place?
It is, sorry, that should have just been 39, I'm not sure how, it used to be 39 and 47, the two addresses were combined.
Okay.
But in this case, site plans have to go with special land use, and since the land use has been postponed or tabled, I suggest you also table the site plan review until the next one.
I'd rather do don't do one without the other.
You can't do the site plan without the special land use, so it needs to be tabled for the next one.
Table for the next meeting or table concurrently with whenever it comes back from legal review?
What you just said.
I'll make that motion.
Support.
Table.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Approve motion to table it? I was still rewriting my.
Motion to table, but not to the next meeting, to whatever meeting it comes back from the legal review.
So you moved.
We'll move on to the site plan review for construction of El Cozumel Restaurant at 1109 South Main.
Thank you. This is a request we saw a couple months back for a rezoning. Parcel was annexed into the city on Cliff Drive as part of this development and then rezoned to business. And so this is the development for that parcel. This is our location, 1109 South Main, and that says the Pier Road. And the parcel that was annexed is to the east there that borders Cliff Drive. This is the zoning for the area. Again, both are zone B2 general business. This is the area of the city where we have annexation by choice with the township. And so you see there are some areas there specifically to the north of this that are currently still in the township. This is the existing condition on the site. I recognize this is a little hard to see, but one of the things about this site, the parcel that was recently brought into the city has a significant slope. So this slopes down. So it's about a 15-foot difference between this middle portion of the parcel here and where Cliff Drive is. So there's a substantial slope from that portion of the property back to the rear. And we'll talk a little bit about how that's impacted their decisions related to site design, and it's driving one of their requests for a landscaping waiver. There is also an existing house on the site here, and that will be demolished as part of the project.
Show that again, please.
Yep.
Spot where.
Yep, this is the house. It's a greenhouse if you drive down 24. Blue?
My favorite blue house.
I might be colorblind then. This is the proposed site plan. The area here in dark gray is the parking area. They meet the exact minimum requirements for parking spaces. They have also, it's hard to see here, they have also provided a stub out for future electric vehicle charging spaces. They have 62 parking spaces, and so they're over 50. This is the first development that triggered that new requirement. And so that stub out and conduit for future electric vehicle charging is there. And so there's a landscaping buffer to the north here. This is another commercial business. And then to the south is a vacant house that's, I believe, still within the township. But because of the slope to the rear of the property, they're trying to get as much parking and development on the site to the east. And so as a result of that, because of our requirements for parking space, depth, as well as maneuvering lanes, it pushes this part of the southern portion of the parking lot further to the south and inside the required landscape buffer. And so they're requesting a waiver to put a fence here instead of the full landscaping buffer because of the limitations on the site. So we'll talk about that. This is the full landscaping plan for the site. They are proposing to keep all of the existing trees that are not scrub trees, essentially, on the eastern portion of the site. And then again, you can see the landscaping buffer provided to the north, and then the required green belt along the right of way, and required parking lot landscaping for the ordinance. This is the building's elevation, combination of stone, ephes, and then quite a few sort of windows. It's a building that reflects the use as a Mexican restaurant. And so you can see here the color palette of sort of dark reds, browns, and tans. Just a couple of outstanding zoning ordinance compliance issues with this. One, really the building appearance, we just need the applicant to confirm the transparency on the front. It's required to be 20%. They appear to be well over the 20%. We just need that percentage noted on the site plan. The other is to confirm the total area of the building that is approved or appropriate predominant building materials. They provided a summary of the amount of building that's the ephes material, but there is one elevation that includes concrete siding, which is not an approved building material. And so just need to confirm that with that, we're still under 50% at the total. And certainly as staff, we're happy to work with the applicant to adjust that as needed to be sure that we're meeting our standard. The next issue is one that's a little bit subjective, and that is that this development is located in the city's M24 corridor overlay district. In this case, that overlay district really deals with access management. Access management essentially meaning how are cars accessing M24 via driveways. And within that section of the ordinance, there's a requirement for driveway spacing, that there is no physical way for this property to be. It's bordered by driveways to both the north and the south. The requirement for driveway spacing there, given the speed on M24, would be like 400 feet. And so as a planning commission, when that comes up, you have some options in that overlay district. You can allow the driveway to be developed as long as it gets approved by MDOT. There will be a required approval by MDOT for this driveway, regardless of what you all decide to do. Or you can determine that the applicant needs to pursue other options for either a service drive or a shared drive with an adjacent property to limit access to M24. You all may remember that the proposed Popeyes development by Bell Tire in the same area was approved here at the Planning Commission, but then in their MDOT review was required to do a joint drive with the two commercial properties. And so this is, the applicant submitted this documentation in their site plan. This dark black area here is their proposed building. And you can see the existing drives along M24. And then the last thing is the landscaping standard. So we have the ability as Planning Commission to waive landscaping standards if it's determined that building the landscape, installing the landscaping isn't feasible on the property due to the property's unique characteristics. And so in this case, the applicant's requesting two waivers from landscaping. The first, as I mentioned, the southern area here, because of the size of the parking lot and required dimensions, they just don't have the space to hit the 20-foot buffer. And also they were concerned about installing landscaping with so little area right next to parking and being sure the landscaping would die. And so they're requesting to install just a fence on that area as an alternative. The property to the south is a residential structure, but it is vacant. And it's within the township. So that may become something different in the future. Today, it's a vacant residential structure.
Mr. Ball, is it a 6-foot privacy fence that's being installed along there?
It is. The other landscaping waiver they're requesting is for the eastern half of the northern border to keep a lot of existing trees that are there today. Some of these existing trees, and the reason for the waiver is they aren't trees that are technically permitted in our landscaping standards. There are some locusts and walnuts in here that aren't permitted for our landscaping standards. The request is essentially to leave those because they serve as a good buffer today. This lot area to the north is just open pit area. There's nothing there. Other department reviews, the fire department mentioned that a fire hydrant will be required as well as a fire department connection. DPW just noted that tap fees will be required. And then engineering, again, noted the need for MDOT approvals, and there were some notes from engineering regarding potential grading on the parking lot. Again, just because of that significant grade to the south, being sure that the parking lot is appropriate and graded effectively. As you are aware, there are 11 standards in the zoning ordinance for approval of a site plan. To approve a site plan, request has to meet all 11 of those. Our recommendation in this case, first, as a planning commission, you all need to determine whether or not the landscaping waiver is appropriate and whether or not that driveway is reasonable given the M24 overlay. Assuming that you all grant waivers or grant the waiver for landscaping that the driveway is appropriate, our recommendation is to approve the site plan with conditions that the outstanding staff review comments get addressed, as well as our remaining issues related to building materials and some of the minor outstanding zoning compliance issues. Any questions for me?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I looked on the plans here, but there's no exit on the east side of that property on Cliff Drive, is there?
That is correct. There's a retention pond here, but they're planning on leaving as much of this essentially naturalistic.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Ball, the driveway is 30 foot wide. Is that standard under the city ordinances? Because it's not wide enough for 3 lanes, so we're not going to have the left and right hand turn exit and incoming.
I believe there will be a right and left out of that driveway.
30 foot width.
Yeah, correct. You can do 10-foot lanes, turn lanes. You don't actually have to be that wide.
Some of us like 12
Some of us think you don't have to.
Well,
So usually with a 30-foot drive, you can do 3. And I'll let the engineers speak to that.
So
My
I didn't
expectation
know
is-
good driveway standards for it.
Yeah, so it did meet our driveway standards. It will also have to meet MDOT driveway standards as well, and that was the review by the city engineer, I believe. There are engineering comments related to that drive. I'm not sure if you can see it. Well, primarily related to, there is a pathway that goes through here. And so the engineering comments in your packet from our engineer was really about marrying up this drive with that pathway and ensuring that's done.
Because if we're talking about the M24, people will be traveling at high rates of speed, trying to make that right-hand turn. Just from experience, they make wide right-hand turns when they turn into a restaurant like that. I'm a little afraid that, if we have somebody attempting to make a left-hand turn out there, they're either going to be blocking the right-hand lane or they're going to be hit by the incoming vehicle. And yes, I understand this is perhaps an ordinance issue that you deal with.
Well, I mean, our city engineering standards, and again, I can let the applicant speak to that. I don't believe we included the driveway detail, but I'm confident there's a plan for a right, left, and a right turn or straight in that drive. 30 feet is an adequate space for that. So the question about the right turn being wide, the way that's usually addressed is via a deceleration lane, right? So you come off and out. In this case, that's a bit of a challenge because there is this walkway here that would essentially have to be moved, or something we have to change that deceleration lane. It also is a request the planning commission could have that ultimately any approval for that would be up to the state. It's MDOT's right of way, and so if we'd like to see that deceleration lane, that'll have to be approved by MDOT.
If this is on the east side of the road, would the deceleration lane be from the south? And there's a driveway to the residential house right there.
Correct. So I mean, the deceleration lane would have to be here. And the house's driveway is here. So again, I don't know exactly how much space there is there, if that's reasonable or not. And I believe there is a pretty decent shoulder there. not a traffic engineer. So, I mean, if there are concerns about that, we could ask for more detail from the applicant in terms of the traffic study or the analysis. Again, a lot of that will also have to be approved via MDOT.
So MDOT hasn't looked at this yet.
I'll let the applicant speak to that, I'm not sure. I know that they've had some discussions, but I don't know if there's been a formal application.
Thank you. All right, any more questions? If not, if you'd like to speak to the applicant, if you'd like to address them.
Corey Mayberry with Davis Land Surveying. We put together a site plan and also a little Timbergate construction, a builder, here for questions also. I think that what we're proposing to do is very well presented by your staff. I think some of the questions you have, we're looking for is landscape. If we could go to just the overall site plan. So what the landscape plan probably does. There you go. So with the landscape, what we're proposing, and this was all part of the process as far as trying to make everything fit and have the least impact. The further east you go, that whole lot is basically where you see the overhead lines going. That's the second lot, and that's primarily it's all wood. It's all wood. It's thick. We have to get into that a little bit to meet the parking requirements, and that's also where it drops off, as was mentioned earlier. So the waiver we're looking for is you can see the dashed line going through that whole row on the south side. That's the actual setback because it's residential use to the south. That property is currently being marketed as commercial, as that property here is. And then the next property to the south of that is office commercial. So we understand that's what it is and that's a requirement. But what we're proposing on that is a 6-foot PVC, so it's not the maintenance issue, privacy fence, basically from where the existing little parking kickout is for the house, back past the parking area and get back into the existing trees and vegetation. We noted on the plans that we will be cleaning just the brush and the underbrush material, keeping all the mature trees. That's the intent. There's an extensive list on the landscape plan of the trees that were measured over 8 inches for the ones to keep. There are quite a few, and there are very mature trees back in there, so the applicant doesn't have any desire to remove those. We did at some point talk about a drive going out to Cliff Drive, but that is really not a neighborly thing, just because it is a gravel drive. There is a residence on the south side there that is a residence, so we're trying to keep everything kind of away from that and maintain the existing tree buffer, and that's why we're looking for that waiver, is if physically on this lot, a lot of fill, a lot of balance, a lot of moving dirt, we can move that parking lot further to the east, but we'd have to eliminate that entire row on the south, so it would push it back quite a bit, and basically that whole lot in the back would be there next to the other house. These are things that we looked at, and that's why we're looking for a waiver on that. We understand the screening, that's why we want we're proposing a 6-foot privacy fence. And then on the north side, where it's circled up there, again, that's essentially, I forget if it's an A or B, but it goes from a 10-foot technically to a 20-foot through there, but that is vacant, that is part of the piece that's in front, it's just not zoned the same as the front piece. So that's why it kind of jumps down that way, we just want to maintain that whole area as is, other than cleaning and the brush and that. So I think most people would agree that the mature trees that are in there provide a better buffer as they mix, and if you go and start planting your 6-foot high, 5 foot or 6 foot high, 2 and 3 inch caliper trees. So that's the intent on those two waivers. There's a question regarding the driveway. The 30-foot spacing is adequate. Just one minute, is adequate for 3. It is not straight that way. The 30-foot is what NDOT requires for their entrance. Now, we have not gone through the NDOT process yet. I talked to Steve Gasser, who's a permit engineer at the NDOT Davidson TSC, and based on what we had, he said, yeah, we might have to tweak it a little bit. There's some that should work in there because it's a transitional speed zone through there. It's higher to the south, less to the north. So he said that's one of those areas that's kind of transitional, so it's not as restrictive in their mind. But no, we have not formally gone through that. The plan is to get through site plans. We know that we're not tweaking things at this stage, and then go there as part of the engineering and finally everything out. In regards to right turns into the site, there's a significant paved shoulder, and that was delivered on MDOT when they redid that entire section through there. They made it 5 lanes plus an additional working lane. So then that's why you don't see the deceleration or acceleration rate they typically would see. They've got to account for that, and I think we've seen it many times with maintenance trucks, people go in there, use that lane, so they don't disrupt traffic. So that's essentially a de facto XL decel lane coming in and going out for that entire corridor through there on both sides. And that's, if you look at the the aerial image on there, you can see that the new drives and the constructed Sunset do not have XL decel, and that's the only reason. Otherwise, typically you would see that. And I think they asked, hopefully answered the question, unless I missed any. Driveway spacing, we're aware, having worked through that with NDOT, again, that's kind of a real of our preliminary discussions, was kind of where we're at, and the transition from the higher speeds to the south and slower speeds to the north. But other than that, we're proposing a family sit-down restaurant, obviously not a drive-through, just a family. There are other facilities, this is not their only one, but is one in this area. And I think they're excited to be here. We take a lot of thought in the process and trying to minimize impacts. The Cliff Drive parcel was acquired during this process because we had the parking was not required for any additional work or anything. Just we couldn't fit the parking in there and meet the standards that it was with stormwater retention and everything that was related to the site development. So that was never really intended, but we did talk about, well, I may put a drive one out there, but I don't think it really wasn't a viable option because we didn't want to encumber the back pieces because that back road through there is primarily all residential, primarily township, but still residential. So with that, I'm open to any questions and anything we have.
I just wanted to ask you, so in regards to the percentages on the material for the building, so is the EPIS, how much of the percentage is for EPIS and what is for the cement siding?
I'll for the cases of Timbergate, there is a lot of discussion on the different parts, but I was not helpful to those.
Okay, thank
Casey
you.
Carpenter with
Thank you.
Timbergate Construction. I was just given this a couple hours ago here from the architect that does talk about the percentages, and we would have to tweak a couple of those, and then I think also find out, because the architect was under the understanding that the cement siding would also count as a natural or an approved building material, and not part of that non-approved material, which then definitely does change those percentages. So, I mean, I could read them off, but I don't know, is that would really, I think we need to tweak them a little bit. They're close, but it's something that I was gonna, I guess, work through with Jason and the architect to figure out exactly, what we need to be. We're at 19% on the glass on the front, and I know it needs to be 20, so, we gotta come up with, I guess, essentially 1% more, and, a couple little things, but we're more than prepared to work through those, little details.
Thank you. All right, any other discussion? Commissioner Chan?
I'm sorry, I'm having a question about the numbers for the trees and that. Would, if we were to ask to see what MDOT might make changes, could that possibly have some impact on the number of trees and the location, or?
It shouldn't impact anything that they're asking for a waiver for. Essentially, it could impact the area that's the green belt there on the right of way.
Yeah.
But my suspicion is that MDOT probably doesn't require that. Well, yes, it could impact that. If it did and it didn't meet the standards, they'd have to come back to you all for a second.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering about, because they have trees in the front parking area, and if the driveway, if MDOT makes some request for changes there, it could have an impact on.
Correct, and in that case, they would do a site plan amendment. If they could still fit the required number of trees there in that green belt, it'd be administratively approved. If they couldn't, then they have to come back to you all for it.
Oh, okay, so it's not something where we would want to say, let's see what MDOT says first before, or?
If you all have concerns generally about access management, I think that's one thing you could do is wait to see, what MDOT's response is. They aren't gonna be able to move through with the building plan review process until we get an approval from MDOT regardless. So your impact there in terms of timing isn't substantial, but if you were to do that, it may delay by 30 days or so in terms of getting in front of the building.
Any more discussion or questions? I guess looking at starting with the driveway, I guess thoughts on that. To me, if MDOT has to come through, us accepting it as is, if they're stating 30 feet is standard, and then if MDOT needs to make changes, they're going to make changes. To me, that seems reasonable. And then as far as the landscaping, and Jason too, you said this, based on the property and how it's set up, it's reasonable at this point to kind of make sense that the landscaping that they're proposing makes sense for the site, correct?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this because it's a new standard in granting that waiver. In this case, it's not just out of convenience. As Corey mentioned, there are some pretty significant limitations on the site. And so with the amount of parking that we require for that use, 62 spaces is a lot of physical space. And so, there are other options. Essentially, if you look at that southern row of parking would have to go away and be placed further to the east. And so that creates a lot of challenges, given that at that point you've got 10 or 15 feet of slope and also impacting a bunch of existing trees and the house there you can see to the south. So in this case, there are some strong rationale for the uniqueness of the property driving that landscaping waiver, not just convenience, like I think we've seen in some other instances.
Thank you.
I noticed none of the commission members have concerns about the smells caused by burritos and tamales.
No, in fact, I really like that.
I mean, it's mostly in jest, but the odor control issue affects all businesses, not just marijuana businesses. And the gentleman in the back indicated about McDonald's, I think it was. I go to McDonald's, I smell grease. So this property and all of the properties should have that ordinance enforced. Other than that, I think, Mr. Ball's presentation is appropriate, and I'd be willing to make, although I don't want to, I'll let Ms. Bostic make this motion if you want.
Thank you. All right, as to the landscaping waiver, I'll make a motion to grant a waiver for the requirements of section 7-15.02.f to put a fence in the place of a type B landscaping buffer along the southern lot line, and to allow the preservation of existing trees in place of a type B landscaping buffer along the eastern 300 feet of the northern lot line, because the property has a significant slope and many trees on the eastern portion of which the limits potential developable area.
Support.
All right, any more discussion? Commissioner Copeland?
Might be a dumb question. My first question has got to be a dumb one, right? So what is the purpose of the buffer zone to have what would be required there? Bushes or something? Is this to block
The natural.
It's a natural.
headlights?
Yeah. With a green buffer typically, right?
So, yeah, I can answer that very specifically. So that because it's residential to the south, the type B buffer would require 1 tree and 6 shrubs per 30 feet, plus the fence. So they're doing the fence part. They're not doing the landscaping because there's concern about the liability of the landscaping, given the limited space there between the fence and the parking lot. The buffer also is required to be 20 feet wide. And so in this case, they're proposing the fence in place of all of those things because of limitations on the site. If this residential property to the south was a residential neighborhood, and a property that's likely to continue to be used as residential, was an area of the city that we had planned for residential, my recommendation would be different. But in this case, this is a portion of the city that's planned for commercial use. Everything there is transitioning to commercial use, and so requiring that kind of extensive buffer likely doesn't make sense. It's unlikely that that house there in the south, like you mentioned, is being marketed as commercial, is repurposed for residential use.
So they'd have to put a fence up regardless.
Correct.
I'm not a big fan of fences. I think fences are to keep people out.
Well, it's also the block and even nuisance,
Yeah.
so it's like, I doubt if it'll block it.
I get it, I just don't.
But also, did I hear correctly that some of this area, if we required them to put in the trees or shrubs, is in places where they wouldn't survive?
That was one of the primary.
So that's a problem, if we're gonna make them plant bushes or trees in an area where there's a bunch of rocks or water or slope.
Well, in this case, the issue is
You have to
just
come
that
up with
they,
something else.
in this case, the issue is they just be so close to the parking lot. And so the alternative here really is if that buffer has to be in place, this row of parking ends up over here. So that's kind of the site option.
If this residential house to the south is demoed and redeveloped in a commercial fashion, and that fence be removed at that point?
It could be, yes, it'd be a commercial buffer and you'd have the same sort of minimal landscaping you have to the north in adjacent commercial use.
I'm just thinking like business wise, you want to be as visible as possible. So I'm trying to visualize driving from the, 69 up, how much the building's going to be visible.
Yeah, so the fence ends here. So the building's gonna be pretty visible. The fence is 6 feet tall. I can't read any of those heights from here. How tall is the building, Casey, ballpark? 20-ish feet, give or take, 5
Okay.
feet.
Okay.
17 feet, says our building inspector. Thank you, Mike. So you should still have quite a bit of visibility there given the fence.
Corey, I did have a question for you. I noticed on the front, it looks like there is, to either side of the entrance, are those pergolas or what is it?
Yes, it's a false roof for the architectural.
Okay.
You're talking in the front entrance there?
Yeah.
So that would be the front, which essentially would be the pier road side.
Okay.
With the parking there, but the majority one you see would be the second one down.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what it is. It's an architectural feature to it. So,
It's also an area planned for outdoor seating, right?
yes.
Well, that's where I was going with that.
So it's outdoor seating.
Oh,
but
yes,
it's
I'm
not-
sorry, I left the exterior of the building, part of it is.
Yeah,
It's outdoor seating, but it's not year round.
Right.
So it's not enclosed.
not enclosed, yeah.
Thank you. Any more discussion? So we have a motion and support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
All right, so then we.
Move on to the site plan review. So we
Yeah.
handle the landscaping waivers and then it's a determination of the overall site.
So do we have any discussion on the overall site plan?
So the fence ends out too long on the driveway?
We can approve it, and MDOT's gotta still be substituted for MDOT, right? So I'll make a motion to approve the site plan requested by Al Cosmo to construct a restaurant at 1109 South Main Street because it meets all standards in section 71804 with the following conditions. The applicant addresses all outstanding comments from city departments, and the applicant addresses outstanding zoning ordinance compliance issues related to building materials.
I'll second.
Any more discussion?
When we accept, that would be administratively approved.
Correct. We'll address those conditions administratively unless, like we said, the driveway suddenly drastically changes and the site plan has to be
All right, any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Sorry, the first one. I forgot there's a second one.
All right, we'll move on to other business. We have election of secretary. Currently, Ann is acting as our.
Who's Jeff?
Jeff, okay. All right, so do we have any discussion or any
not it.
Suggestions? Anne did do, you were acting as a secretary prior to that, correct?
Yeah, that was, and after my husband died, I was moving and I wasn't sure where I was gonna move, so knowing it was probably gonna fall sometime in the next term, I stepped down, so. But I'm still a resident. I stay in the city.
So anybody have a motion or suggestion to make to, are you willing to
Are
do
you willing
it?
to do it?
Oh, yeah, I don't mind doing it, I would move that we, appoint Ann Shank to be secretary.
All right, any more discussion? All right, Anne, who's supported? Doug. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Anne's the woman. Good job. All right, we'll move on to correspondence. You have the development activities report. Is it as written or as?
It is as presented, yes.
Thank you. Training report.
It is holiday seasons. I have no upcoming trainings to report at this time.
All right, thank you. Move on to commissioner comments. Commissioner Johnson,
Okay,
Commissioner Roberts,
Also good.
Commissioner Boston.
There's one thing I want to say to warn all of you. I come up Calhoun every day to work to my office, and it came up yesterday, and thank goodness the flags are up on the stop sign, because there are new
Oh,
stop signs in
yes.
Oh,
Calhoun
tonight.
and Michigan.
I found it on the way in
I
today.
know, I almost ran it, but I didn't. I stopped right before, and so it's really good they have those flags.
They might, you know
You need to
what,
put it in the paper, like,
something,
Please
they
don't
need lights on
specific-
those things too, because that's gonna be a problem, because it caught me off guard on the
they
way
just
here.
must have done it on Monday or
They-
something.
yeah. I caught it on the way here too, and I thank goodness for the flags. With the,
It
it
has
has
the
the
flags
reflector on it.
And that's how you know you live in a small town.
Yeah.
I don't know who approved that.
I don't know who approved it either.
Commissioner Margaret?
I, obviously, city commission approved it. I knew about it. I even forgot, but I stopped in time to. It was like, oh, okay, they got it up. So, but anyway, all I wanted to say is Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. See you in January. We've got a blizzard.
Well, we live close enough, we can all walk, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, except for you. Mr. Womack doing.
I drove an hour to get here, and 2.5 hours on Mondays.
Are you gonna move into the city?
Maybe, we'll see. So, a couple things, I've now visited probably a dozen grow operations, both here in Michigan and Colorado. Not all of them smell. Some of them do a great job of odor control, and you can stand in their parking lot 5 feet from the door and not smell it. You can open that front door and you can walk into the foyer and not smell it. It's not until you actually open the door to the grow operation room where the marijuana plants are that you actually smell it. So the fact that we continue to have ongoing nuisance marijuana odor control issues is obviously something that staff, Mr. Newmeyer, myself, code enforcement, police department are all working on. This is obviously an issue that consequences and liability. So we are doing what's best, but we cannot information critical issues related to marijuana businesses. We have to make according to the legal requirements of special use standards, zoning standards. And if the city commission wants to do some changes, that's their
So I have a question. Do we have in it, will we approve that we've had special like repairs on the type of ventilation systems and all the stuff that they had to use?
We do the ordinance excluding details in that sense. We have there is, sometimes those things get used, don't get used, or there are other details why that's a problem. So it's, getting the detail. Getting the details on, trying to, root out the problem, but it takes time.
Commissioner Kelly?
We, separate each other. Still voting.
Very good enough.
holidays. Happy New Year.
Commissioner Atwood?
Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to working with everyone here, having some fun, hopefully. But yeah, with the odor issue, I'm getting annoyed by it because people are telling me almost every day, about the smell. So the smell isn't necessarily an ordinance issue, it's an enforcement issue that takes time. It's both.
Oh,
So there's something wrong with our ordinance?
Yes.
So can we recommend
I think the
to
city,
the city commission?
city commission.
This might be a dangerous thing, but what about like numbering, number on grows in the city?
Sounds like a political issue.
We put a number on retail when we did that, right? So I think, I've been confused on it, honestly, why we didn't restrict it all, but we actually restricted and put 6 on the
City
retail.
commission.
The city commission did that.
Well,
I
again,
remember.
so then
You have no
what,
number on anything.
so then what needs to happen? What discussion needs to take place for that to be revisited? What's the proper forum for that? There is no limit on grow facilities, correct? If we think as, commissions that that's a good idea to put a limit on them, how do we make that happen? What do we do?
Is it our job as the planning commission to send a recommendation to the city commission that they address that to clarify the issue?
So in this case, your challenge there is when it comes to marijuana, you have 2 parallel ordinances. You have a licensing ordinance, and then we have a zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance relates to marijuana is really short. The licensing ordinance carries the vast majority of your regulations, including the limit on number of retailers. So that if you're going to limit number, that's really a licensing ordinance. So as a planning commission, you can make a recommendation to the city commission that, hey, they ought to think about this. But, going through drafting or adopting that change is really up to them because it lives in the city's police power. Which is not
Oh, yeah.
so.
Yeah, no, that power's in their hands, but that we can make that recommendation.
Certainly.
I would just think that if it ever becomes federally legal, there'd be a rush to, take all availability. So, I don't know, might be something to get ahead of, I would think.
Well, many of these proposed grow facilities, the people that own them don't live in Lapeer. This gentleman was from Livonia. And so, at the end of the day, we're here representing the city of Lapeer, not Livonia. Not where their home is, so.
That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Shane?
Well, I guess I would follow that up because in a sense, to follow up on your comments, Doug, I think we also have to look at the image of the city. And I think we have to be concerned also about the image we convey to future residents, future businesses. And for that reason, again, I would support that we send a recommendation to the city commission to look at setting a limit on the number of growth facilities.
You've got, always we had a term, but when that happened, quite some time ago, it feels like now, there was litigation as a result of that. And that was because of the fact that we didn't limit it to a certain number. When you look at how you're going to score kind of selection process, and there was litigation over that issue. So I don't know if we want to sit here as a planning commission and make a recommendation on a specific number. I don't know if that's necessarily our role as the planning commission. So that's my 2 cents. That's all I'm
But
saying.
can we make a recommendation for them to address, maybe looking at a number? Not for us to say we want them to do, what we have 7-7, but just to recommend that they revisit that. Because I think Mr. Denny's made a comment that made sense to me is you learn too and you have them, right? So we had these, I think they were mad, we had the highest recommendation of these, the venting systems and all of the stuff they have, and clearly whether they're not actually using them correctly and or we're enforcing them, but we've kind of learned our lesson now too. And now that you hear the community feedback and we can drive down the street and we can smell it, and we have people coming from out of the city to want to, because we're a town that allows it, to now that we have a little more information and we kind of know what's going on, to maybe be a little bit more insightful on looking at it, a little different.
And I remember when we actually established, so when we actually took the, the licensing, like the ordinance, and I remember us sitting here as a planning commission and going over the details, which included the odor control requirements. And it was really lengthy. We went over that, I don't know how many meetings that was. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe that is where we need to look at having, maybe the city commission or reviewing those type of change, those type of requirements. And not necessarily get caught up in the number issue, but making sure that the licensing ordinance doesn't need changing. Is there something there that we can do to better enforce what we're doing?
Well, as an afterthought, the other thing is maybe when the lawyer is looking at the interpretation, maybe there's a way based on his recommendation to address defining whether or not it fits into didn't we limit it to industrial sites? Isn't that part of the problem? So if we get clarification and the recommendation be that we not just leave that as medical, but make it both medical and what's the other word, rehab, whatever they call it. Recreational. Maybe that's where it needs to go, so that that's cleared up, because Mr. Womack made it clear that as it stood, our interpretation of the way it's written, that it could not be there. But if that's the case, maybe the lawyer, when he's looking at it, maybe there's a way to make that correction in that, what's the best word for that? In the definition of where it does fit and doesn't fit. Maybe we need to correct that if we can, or for future opportunities, make that definition clear based on what the attorney's recommendations are. So maybe whoever presents it to the lawyer, part 2 of that question would be, if we can't because it's medical, how do we correct that for future cases?
Well, and even though we don't make that rule, the city commission does, I think we have a responsibility as a planning commission when we sit here meeting after meeting after meeting and listening to the public, knowing what we know and driving around, that it would be, I think, appropriate for us to make a recommendation, at least for the city commission, to revisit it and look at it. If they don't do anything from there, then that's on them, that's their rights to do it. But I think that it wouldn't hurt us to make a recommendation to them, at least to know that it's an issue that we think maybe needs to be revisited.
And it sounds like they're running into the issue as well.
So are you making that recommendation?
Not to
Yes.
Not to what?
not to belabor the point, but you might want to wait until we are in an appropriate place on the agenda to make recommendations like that, not during the council comments. So if we were to make a recommendation, my recommendation would be that we wait till the next meeting.
When is the appropriate time and how do we go about it?
And then next meeting.
When it's on the
Sorry,
agenda.
I was just trying to.
So how does it get on the agenda? I have to request a spot.
Jason, how would you recommend us to handle that?
Honestly, it's up to you on how you handled it in the past. I mean, Robert's Rules of Order typically say if you're gonna make a recommendation or take a formal action, it should be on the agenda. That being said, there's certainly no reason we can't make a motion to make a recommendation at other points in time in the meeting. I'd say it's up to you all in terms of how you want to handle it and how you typically handle the commission for comment. I haven't been here long enough to tell you, if that's been a tradition or not.
Yeah, well, typically, it's been an open book up here.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's on our agenda tonight. It was like we're addressing marijuana.
Yeah.
Possibly in public.
The other point I just would clarify this to you, maybe it's not an issue, but when somebody submits an application, their application gets submitted and stays with the ordinance as it exists at the point in time they submitted that application. So as long as this application is
Oh,
pending,
yeah,
any changes that happen won't affect the current application that's in
Right,
front of
no,
them. So
yeah.
just to clear that up. So I mean, I would say as a planning commission, you know, I'm comfortable with you making that recommendation at this point in the meeting, or if you want to be sure that's an agenda point, so it's, you know, publicly known that's a consideration for next time, you can do that as well.
To me, we can't limit the number, so we have to address whatever we can.
So are you making a recommendation this evening, or would you?
I mean, I feel comfortable, we've done it that way before, making a recommendation.
But now we have to make a motion during commissioner comments, we've never done that.
Commissioner comments are fairly new too.
Yeah.
We're only on, what, a year of these, doing that.
The commissioner comments, you know, we've had those on there for years.
Plus, we'd have to modify how we put our agendas together, plus this was not approved as part of the agenda approval.
But isn't us addressing a topic that was in front of us this evening, and we're addressing it as commissioner comments?
Which should be addressed as formal action in a future meeting.
Okay, so how do we go about that? Because I've asked this question 3 times now. So what do we do?
I think we just say, Kim, I want to put this on the agenda right
That's
for the next Monday, for the next meeting.
Isn't that what Ann just did?
No, she wants to
She wants
make a
to
motion
know
now.
right now.
Oh, okay.
Well, I did that based on what, his suggestion was, that it's been handled that way, it seemed in the past. So whatever, however
Well,
it
if
needs to be.
you have, what you say, are you making a motion tonight? If you can, we can decide. If not, we can agree to put on the agenda
It
for next
seems
month.
that there's opposition to that. So to not spin the wheels and waste any more time, I request that that be placed on the agenda.
All right, thank you. Kim, you got that? Thank you. All right, no more discussion or comments from the commissioners. Again, I want to say Merry Christmas to everyone and Happy New Year. And we'll see you in January. So
Make a motion for adjournment?
with that,
Be prepared for a
Meeting
huge
adjourned.
crowd to get a lot of the other people in the public on both sides to make it. On both sides.
No, you weren't. Yeah, that was no, so what happened? Your idea to put your polar bear in front of the elk? Yes, after your. I know if you get my shoulder, I was like, what's that? And then I'm like, oh, I mean. So. Well. Yeah.